I've been playing saxophone for 32 years. Then I started engineering about 2002, but then I went to school for it in 2004. So my affiliation with State Services for the Blind goes a long way back. You know, I had an instructor who told me he didn't think I'd go very far because of my eyesight.
Brian Powers, musician, engineer, teacher, and client at State Services for the Blind.
What I loved about State Services, though, the most is that they really narrowed it down to focus on what you really need to be productive. Just don't be afraid to use the services that are out there. I guess that's my biggest. I know I've said it like 3 times, but it's true. We're so afraid of looking for help. We think it makes us look weak, or we think it accentuates our disability. Sometimes we're too blinded by trying to be independent that we refuse to ask for it and end up shooting ourselves in the foot.
It's our pleasure to present professional saxophone player, engineer, Brian Snowman Powers. And for more podcasts with a blindness perspective, check us out on the web at blindabilities.com, on Twitter at blindabilities, and download the free Blind Abilities app from the App Store. That's 2 words, Blind Abilities. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to Blind Abilities. I'm Jeff Thompson. Brian, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming over and joining us here in the studios.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff, for doing this.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. But really, the thanks does go to you. Hey, Brian, can you start it out by telling us how you got affiliated with State Services?
My affiliation with State Services for the Blind goes a long way back. So I'm from Louisiana originally. You know, I've been a musician all my life. The great thing about musician and being a jazz musician is I'm an improviser. So, because even, sight reading is tough with our vision. No, so State Services from Louisiana actually helped me go to a jazz conservatory in New York back in 1995, which was amazing. So I actually went to the best jazz conservatory in America for performance. And then I toured for many years. And then when I had my kids, we decided to stay closer to home. And we ended up moving out here to Minnesota because this is where my ex-wife's family is from. Then I actually started engineering as a way to stay around home more. And then State Services actually helped me go to school for that at IPR here in Minneapolis. And then I opened my own studio in my house for a little while. And then I ended up changing businesses and expanding. And then the current State Services with Brianna helped me get new gear and get some equipment for starting up my own studio. And actually now I've expanded into a building in Uptown, which has actually been really nice. So we're actually building that out now. But all the core gear that I needed to get and some things for my site, including like a nice touchscreen monitor and a desk that had all the equipment closer to eye level, rather I didn't have to bend down underneath. Because most studio racks and gear are in racks and they're behind you or underneath. Well, this special desk that we got actually has the rack gear on top, which makes it easier to see. Yes, I've been dealt with State Services about 3 or 4 times throughout my career. And gosh, it's always been like amazing, like the amount of help and the amount of support and to help us. Because, with our disabilities, it's hard to get normal jobs in general because people, everybody talks about non-discrimination, but all the racial tension going on today. But let's face it, handicapped people still probably are discriminated the most against. Even if you can fulfill the job requirements, the first thing to do is look at what they have to do to accommodate you, and then they don't like that usually. So I have albinism. That's my disability, which gives me drastic nearsightedness. My eyes move, so focusing is a problem. And of course, the sunlight is my mortal enemy, and which makes the music industry great because we do most of our work at night anyway. So there you go.
So what was it like when you entertained the idea of going to engineering school?
So when I first went to recording school, which is when I first used the State Services for Minnesota, I believe it was my sister who's also legally blind. So they helped with some low vision aids, got me hooked up with an eye doctor that really specialized in low vision. We did contacts and things like that. But so my sister actually is the one who initially had found out the information and given it to me. And then when I needed to change and do a new business, I actually just still had their number. And of course, the caseworker wasn't there anymore. It was somebody I knew. It was Brianna.
So Brian, how tough was it to get Brianna on your side?
Well, as far as that round went, it was actually reasonably easy with Brianna because I'd already established that what I was doing was a viable career.
And Brianna is your State Services counselor.
Yes. It wasn't too bad because I think Brianna also I think it was a family member or someone close to her who also had a studio or something of that nature. And so she had already kind of had an idea about that particular job, and I'd already been doing it for 7 or 8 years and making a living at it. And I was changing and forming my own business out of and leaving a partner I'd had. So it was a new business that I was starting. But so yeah, that actually wasn't super hard. For me, writing the business plan was interesting because I'd actually never sat down and wrote an official business plan. And I think my first one was like 40 pages long or something like that. She also hooked me up with like small business services and places where I could get information about setting up a proper business plan. So the hardest part about that particular round with state services was just getting all the details in order, things that I hadn't done before. But Brianna was super great. She even, helped me write the business plan as far as editing it for me, making sure that it fit the criteria. And but actually convincing them was really easy because of the proof that I'd already made a living at it. And then with all the market research I did as a part of the business plan, the state services certainly felt it was a viable, business opportunity.
Well, good job on that. How about when you were going for school for engineering?
The first time I ever did it with going to school for it took a lot more convincing. And I don't know if the criteria had changed much because obviously these had been several years apart. When I first came to state services and went to school for recording, I had to really go in and prove that being an engineer freelance, could be profitable. And because anything in the music industry or the arts, whether you're an author writing a book or whether you're a performer or whatever, is certainly hit or miss and depends a lot, not just on your ability and talent to do it, but your understanding of being an entrepreneur, and then with a handicap of some sort, knowing how to overcome that to achieve what you need. Well, in the music industry, having albinism, I actually have a nickname. They call me Snowman. It actually helped image-wise a lot with my career. To be honest, albinism actually works in my favor because everybody likes a cool image or a unique look, and I definitely have that. Yeah, so it was a little tougher then to get funding to go to school for engineering because, again, it's not like a normal 9-to-5 job that pays X. You had to kind of prove that it could be a source of income for a living. So that was a little tougher.
But as you mentioned, you had been doing it, making a living off of it. Now, Brian, with respect to services, take us back to K through 12 and tell us your experiences.
Oh, sure. Schooling was interesting. So I'm 42. So I was in elementary school, junior high, and high school in the 80s and early 90s. Things were different then than they are now as far as site and state services go. Plus, I was living in Louisiana, and I don't know how different funding is from state to state. I'm sure it is. Back then, originally, they had wanted to send, if you had some sort of disability or blindness, they wanted to send you to a blind school where they actually blindfolded you if you had sight so that you learned how to react and interact without sight at all. And that's how they trained you. And I actually refused to go because I have sight, even though I'm legally blind, and I wanted to learn how to use what I had. Back then, they trained you, if you're legally blind, they trained you as if you were blind completely. At least in Louisiana. I had a counselor who was with me during all my years of schooling, and she got me large print materials when I needed them, taught me Braille and those different things like that if I needed it, worked with me on, those various things. So as far as devices, now, when I was in junior high and elementary school, I used large print books a lot, or Braille books. When I got into high school, obviously with all the class load, and it was just too many heavy books to carry around, because I don't know if you remember what those large print books were like, but they were like huge. Oh my gosh. And like they would come in like, 12 volumes for one book, that kind of thing. But so just, I guess, visual aids like that. They even offered to let me drive if I used that little telescopic lens that they have, I refuse to do that because I don't think you have enough peripheral vision to drive, even if you can pass a test with a little telescope. So I won't do that. I feel like that's dangerous. The biggest thing nowadays, though, is our phones. And in fact, one of the guys here told me about the Over 40 app, which I actually use for magnification, which is amazing. And then I'll use my camera on the phone for zooming to watch things that are far away, like sporting events or whatever, even television sometimes. So the phones now have replaced a lot of adaptive technologies that we would have used. I do have the closed circuit camera TV thing that I use for reading like bills or small print, things like that if I have to. But in high school, the biggest problem, in junior high and that kind of stuff, the biggest problems I always had was bullying, those kinds of things. And that was always, an issue until, you work on your own self-esteem and then, if you take yourself more seriously, then people start to take you more seriously. And actually, my nickname came from a band leader, because people used to call me Frosty the Snowman when I was a kid to tease me. And he actually nicknamed me the Snowman and turned it around, put me on stage as a musician, and it kind of turned around all the bullying, because now it was like a cool thing. It's something that was a positive name, I guess, when it comes to my career choice and everything. So so high school, I had some help. They also kind of taught me how to be independent, and then I ended up going to New York for college, which, blind man on the streets of New York, wandering around, it was a challenge, but it was great.
And now you're starting or enhancing your engineering company. What is it like on a day-to-day basis being an engineer in the music industry with a visual impairment?
Well, engineering is interesting because obviously we have to do a lot with computer work, a lot with consoles and wiring. So there's some things I can't do. For example, I can't solder cables together, although they even use magnifying glasses for that. I have to get so close, I'd probably burn my nose off with solder.
Or melt like a snowman.
Exactly. So a lot of times I just have to look really close. Like if I'm working on a large format console, which has a lot of little bitty knobs, buttons, little bitty words written. A lot of times I memorize where things are. Obviously, having a visual problem helps you with your memory, because you have to do a lot of things by memory, by touch and feel. So a lot of times I'll either just literally lean over the console, look really close until I have things memorized where things are, and then I just kind of know where things are. But when it comes to things I really have trouble seeing, I'll use the zooming feature on my phone or the Over 40 app. When I'm wiring up gear and I'm underneath or behind the desk, do a lot of wiring and stuff, I'll definitely use zooming features and that kind of thing, so I can read what's going on and see stuff in the dark. So it's definitely a little cumbersome to have a device with you, but again, in today's age, the cell phone has become just an indispensable tool for visually impaired.
Brian, you mentioned the Over 40 app for your iPhone. Can you explain to our listeners how you utilize that app?
Yeah, I guess I don't know what it was originally meant for. I'm sure the name says it all, like for people adults who vision starts going bad. For us, what it is, it allows for magnification well beyond what like your photo, your picture thing can do. Plus, of course, you have the flashlight involved. And it's got a little bit more of a stabilization feature than your camera does. So when you get super zoomed in, you can be pretty shaky. It works on that a little bit too. And it focuses better the more you zoom. So unlike the camera, which will kind of get blurry a bunch as it's trying to focus in on something. So it's got a lot better features for zooming in really close. And that combined with the light. Plus, it can take pictures if you need to take a picture of something and then take a look at it later. But yeah, it's a more enhanced zooming tool with better stabilization.
Well, great. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. Brian, for someone who is interested in a musical career or engineering, what advice would you have for them?
First of all, just the industry itself is an entrepreneurial style industry. You have to go get what you want. You have to go get your work, whether you're handicapped or not. Even regular sighted people or whatever have to work really hard at conducting business and getting clients and that kind of thing. And if you are going to work in a facility like a studio or go to school for it, you will need some sort of aid, especially if you're working on consoles. And a lot of times the screens will be far away from you, because a lot of people like to put the computer screens like up on top of things or just out of the way of the gear. So when I went to school, I had them adapt, even when I taught school, use the monitor arms. That way the computer monitor can be moved around. That way when people who don't need it close can have it further back, and then when I need it up close in my face, because even with glasses or contacts, I still need the computer monitor right in my face. There's just no way getting around it. So those monitor arms were very, very useful for that. And I even just went and purchased a small little $100 standalone monitor that just sits. That way I can put it right next to me all the time. So being able to find a way to get your computer screen close to you is a big deal, because you will have to do a lot of computer work. And then in the studios, if you actually get a job in a studio or you're in school learning studio equipment, you'll definitely need to learn wiring. You'll have to be able to be in dark places and still, read the backs of the gear. So you'll need some sort of magnifying, device with a light. And even working with large format consoles, it helps to have that as well. Get your memory up. You'll have to memorize where things are on a console a lot. It helps a ton. It helps keep you from sweating and having to lean over so much. But a lot of it comes down to just dealing with gear that has a lot of small buttons and a lot of small writing. Now, because the music industry is based on hearing, I know a lot of people who have sight issues have really good ears. That's one reason why I make a good engineer. I can hear distortion and sound that people don't even realize is there. So use that, to your advantage, of course. But there are a lot of sight obstacles that you'll have to overcome as far as computer placement and things like that, and gear placement, because things are designed for people with sight. And I know that every school I went to and every school I worked at, especially in the modern era, everybody's been super accommodating, even offering to, make stand desks that rise and fall, for me or whatever. So obviously, generally, In the job market, people aren't as accommodating as far as getting a job. But typically with the school system, I find they're very accommodating for making large print materials, especially if college law instructors use PowerPoints or they'll use things up on a screen, as far as their studies and lectures. What's great about the modern educational system is a lot of them use internet-based services to put their material up for the students to study. And all those PowerPoints they use in lectures, they usually put up on those internet sites for you for as a student resource. So when we used to have people transcribe for us what was on a chalkboard or what was on a PowerPoint, nowadays instructors are putting that up on the internet for their students to use to study. So a lot of that has been taken care of, which is nice.
You're also a teacher.
Yes, I've taught for about 9 years.
And in what area did you teach, Brian?
I've always taught saxophone privately, but I actually worked for Minneapolis Media Institute for a while, and I worked for McNally Smith College of Music. And I taught recording, production, audio mixing, audio editing. I taught post-production for film and video. I'm a certified Pro Tools expert, which is the main software used for recording, songwriting and composition and different things like that, music theory.
McNally Smith, that's a highly sought-after school for musicians.
Well, no, and they just closed, unfortunately. That's been the big news. Actually, I was on Care 11 on Friday about it. It was a sudden closing. They informed all of us in the faculty and student body Thursday evening last week, and it was the day before payday, actually, and said that we weren't getting paid, the school was closing. So a lot of us had to go in for free to actually make sure the students finished the semester, got their grades, so they even got the credits they paid for. It was a big deal. But there are other schools here still, like IPR and Hennepin Tech and some other schools who are still doing that kind of thing. And all across the country, there are a ton of music schools out there and production schools. But yes, I taught at McNally for 3 years.
So, Brian, it's obvious that I'm going to ask you to get me some music that I can put down for this podcast. And it's going to be obvious that you do play saxophone.
Yes, that's what I initially have been doing since I was 8. And I had my first performance 6 months after I started playing. I played Silent Night for the school and got a standing ovation. I was hooked. Performing is still my favorite thing to do. I still gig a whole bunch. That was my first source of income for a long time, and worked out in New York for a long time. I played with Dave Matthews and the Spin Doctors, and I toured with the Samples and a bunch of different groups like that. And here in town, I play a lot. I've played with a lot of gospel groups, Darnell Davis, Excelsior. Played with people from the Sounds of Blackness. Played with Wayne McFarland, and just a bunch of. Played with a group now called the New Primitives, which is a reggae group, and I play with a group called Chase and Ovation, which is an 11-year Prince tribute group actually. And that's still my favorite thing to do is to play. And again, with eyesight, it all comes down to whether you can hear, whether you know how good you can play, and can you play what you hear, that kind of thing. And having bad eyesight never has really hurt me as far as being a musician that way. Sight reading, like I mentioned earlier, was always tough, but you find ways around it. I can pretty much play whenever I hear, and that comes from training up your ears and stuff. But yeah, that's part of my income too.
Oh yeah. I have a hunch that you do know Baker Street.
Yeah, the song?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that request all the time. That one and Bob Seger, Turned the Page, of course. Careless Whisper is another one that people love to hear, that melody. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I've learned all those famous sax lines because you'll just be sitting at a grocery store and somebody's like, oh, saxophone, yeah, Baker Street, right? Or something. And you're just like, yeah, Those are all great songs, though. Mm-hmm. Absolutely great songs.
So that's like modern day saxophone player. Like when I start thinking of influences or people who played the sax, Charlie Parker comes to mind.
He was one of the best known bebop jazz musicians. Jazz had many different eras to it. You had swing, bebop, hard bop. You had, the avant-garde period. You had actually jazz and classical kind of mirrored each other in the different phases of the music that was made. Although jazz happened really fast, where classical took centuries to happen and evolve. But Charlie Parker was definitely a big influence. Him and John Coltrane and Cannonball Adderley was actually one of my favorites. But Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie really brought in the bebop era. They took swing music and brought it up to a whole new intellectual harmonic level. And actually, that's when jazz kind of got away from the listener, because jazz used to be the pop music of the day. That's what people listened to. But when bebop came around and Charlie Parker, those guys played everything so fast and almost too much for the common listener to understand, it became a musician's music then. But love Charlie Parker. His song Donnelly, which we still think Miles Davis actually wrote, but he claimed it anyway, is great influence on a lot of the playing and stuff. But these days as a musician, you have to be able to do a lot of things. You have to be able to play jazz, funk, R&B, rock, depending on what you get hired to play.
Well, flexibility creates opportunities. So, Brian, you mentioned bullying earlier. Now, is that something you'd be comfortable sharing with our listeners?
It was hard. I mean, and it was really mainly from probably like fourth grade through ninth grade that it was the worst. People would throw metal screws at me. They would line up. They would get in a circle around me and take turns hitting me because I couldn't really see who was hitting me. That kind of things. Like it was kind of cool to pick on me, I guess, or anybody with handicaps back then. Where today things are a little different with bullying in school. And they've definitely made some great strides forward. It still happens, but they've definitely been more sensitive. Back then, the more complaints we would raise, the more I would get in trouble about it. The teachers would just be like, well, just deal with it. Just kids being kids. Yeah, things are different, man. It definitely, I still have insecurity because of it. I've never done the whole therapy thing, but I know what my issues are. But definitely, it gives you an insecurity problem. Like even today, like, no matter how much practicing I do, how good I get, I'm always worried about, do people really like what I do? You know what I mean? There's always that insecurity about yourself. I've gotten more secure in my looks, though, as I've turned my image of albinism into part of my professional image. That's gotten a lot better. People still look at me kind of funny sometimes when I'm walking around, but now it might be because they actually see me on stage somewhere more than just the fact that I look different. So I started celebrating the fact that people thought I was different rather than fearing it like I used to as a kid or wanting to be normal, so to speak. And nowadays, let's face it, normal has changed. Everybody's a little weird nowadays, so it's different. It did drive me to be more independent, though, I think. There was always a particular stigmatism, I think that's the right word, attached to, any kind of handicap or handicap devices. One of the reasons I stopped using large print books, and I didn't say this earlier, but was because I was tired of people looking at me strange when I did, or having to have a special desk that was over the size, bigger than the other students' desks because I had to have all that big material or big magnifying glass. I wanted to be as normal as possible, so I started using just what everybody else was using and just kind of trying to figure my own way out through it, which I don't know if that was the smartest idea. Like even nowadays, people sometimes don't realize I even have an eyesight problem because not that I try to hide it, but just in my day-to-day caring of myself, I got so used to trying to hide it when I was a kid that I guess I got kind of good at it. And it was hard, man. It was really hard, and it affects you your whole life. You don't ever really get over it, even though you certainly can overcome it. And I think I've done a pretty good job of that. And again, that's where my nickname came from. And I celebrate that a lot. But a lot of it comes down to one reason you get bullied is not just because you have a handicap, but because you allow yourself and you think of yourself as inferior. And usually the perceptions you have of yourself, you project onto other people, then they have the same feelings about you. And the better you look at yourself, then the better other people look at you too. As touchy-feely as that sounds, it really is the truth.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I remember when we first started corresponding by email, I saw the snowman at the bottom, something about a snowman and a portal.
Was it from the mind of the snowman through his iPhone portal or yeah? Yeah, I mean, it's a colorful industry. It's an image-driven industry, which is what's so interesting why I got into it, because it is very image-driven. And again, the handicaps certainly helped with being an image, so it's the more colorful you are in the music business, the better. The more over exaggerated you are, the better.
Brian, when I was young, I didn't know much about albinism, but when I came across a great blues guitar player named Johnny Winter, I tied the two together. And so now when people see you playing, I don't know if they see the disability of blindness or albinism, but they see a positive role model with your success.
I hope so. What's really interesting about the common man these days, so for example, Edgar and Johnny Winter, and actually I get that reference a lot, obviously, playing saxophone and I play a lot of blues and rock music too, so they get brought up a ton, especially Edgar, with Frankenstein. I think that was his big song, right? Something like that. And then actually there's a famous wrestler, I think, here from Minnesota, the Crusher from the old days. Yep. I get called the Crusher sometimes. Or Ric Flair, because he was really blonde, But sometimes people don't even associate it with the handicap anymore, because I can't tell you how many times people have asked me what my real hair color was. And I'm kind of looking at them like, don't you see the hair in my arms and my eye? I couldn't dye all that. My eyebrows and my beard and my hair, And I don't know if that's just because people aren't used to seeing albinism still, or even on stage, they think it's just a look in some ways. Some people know. And,
Goth.
Yeah, sure. And actually, I'll even go, sometimes I like to, put dye and I'll color my hair for gigs and things like that. So, yeah, it's funny. Some people don't even realize that it's actually, that I even have a disability sometimes. But, and of course, those that do, it's amazing the example that you are for people who don't even realize it. And like people who have their own struggles, or they actually see someone with a handicap do it, maybe either what they do or at least something that seems like that. So you hope to be an inspiration to people. And I didn't even know that Minnesota, I guess, is the national chapter for albinism's capital, like NOAA or something like that, I think. Because Because I know that the University of Minnesota actually has a research program for people with albinism or something like that. Like when I first moved here, I found that out. I had no idea. But I still haven't seen very many people with albinism here at all. Yeah, but it's funny how a lot of people don't even realize it. And, every now and then I'll get the odd comment of, well, people think I'm like 90 or something, like especially I haven't shaved, which actually, to be honest with you, that actually probably insults me the most because I'm sitting there going like, I don't have any wrinkles. I don't look 90, but every now and then you'll still hear that sometime.
Brian, where can people go to find out more about Brian Powers and his engineering and his sax playing and his music?
Until I get the new stuff up, as far as my own personal compositions and things, I do have a SoundCloud that I will be putting up on snowmanband.com. Will also be going up this year, probably early in the year. And of course, you can always look me up on Facebook, Brian Powers. Even if you just Google Brian Snowman Powers, you'll find a ton of me everywhere. But I play a lot, like every Tuesday down at Shaw's Bar and Grill. I play with the New Primitives. It's like reggae and New Orleans music. And then again, I play with Chase and Ovation, which is a Prince tribute band. We play at Bunkers every month. But we tour the country and internationally with those guys. And then I will be playing with my own band starting this year, the Twin Cities Jazz Fest and places like that. So if you just look me up online, you will find me.
We'll be sure to put some of those links right in the show notes. Brian, it's really cool that you're able to live out your passion and record and play with such a diverse group of musicians.
Yeah, I've been very, very blessed to, I work with a lot of, even my local work isn't even that much. I work with a lot of national and international artists. I just mixed 4 solos on a record with Victor Wooten, who's one of the top 5 bass players of all time. I guess with me, people expect really good quality of sound. Like I'm known for really high fidelity sound. Like everything sounds really 3-dimensional, really top notch. It's national, international level sound. It's and of course I credit my hearing to that, and because of the lack of eyesight, I guess. But so that's kind of what people come to me for, is like really, really high fidelity sound in their projects.
Well, Brian, is there anything else you would like to leave our listeners with?
Just that, people talk about following your dreams a lot. And I know with handicaps in general, our dreams can seem really out of reach. And the term following your dreams, though, to me kind of took on a different meaning the older I get. Dreams are great, and you want to have hope for a future, but you have to take a very practical approach to your dreams. You can't just think of them as some far-off, distant land where things happen to you. You don't have to work hard for them. There's a lot of work that goes into achieving your goals, and especially with disability, we have to work about 30 times harder. But there are resources out there to help, and I've benefited from them all my life in the key pivotal moments of my life. I know that budgets change, and sometimes you can't always get what you think you want to get or should get from these services because of constraints of regulations and things, but those services are there. There's a lot of help. There's a lot of people who even just want to encourage you and want to help, and obviously for low vision aids and things, and never be afraid to ask for help. A lot of us just want to be as independent as we can, but the things you can achieve faster, or even that you didn't know you could achieve, you can achieve with help from these services. I know Brianna has just been a spark of life, I know, into what I've been doing. And even after, I know she's worked with my sister and stuff a ton. And again, it's just don't be afraid to use the services that are out there. I guess that's my biggest, I know I've said it like 3 times, but it's true. We're so afraid of looking for help. We think it makes us look weak, or we think it accentuates our disability. But in a lot of ways, that help will reduce our disability, and yet sometimes we're too blinded by trying to be independent that we refuse to ask for it and end up shooting ourselves in the foot.
So Brian, I'm sure on your next album we'll be able to look down in the credits in the small braille and read, "Thank you, State Services for the Blind."
Oh, well, if there were braille on the album, yes, absolutely. No, but there's definitely a thank you or 8 coming for them because of, again, they helped me with both schoolings that I've had, and they helped me with setting up the new studio. Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, with all your engineering, mixing, recording, playing, gigging, all that, doesn't productivity feel good?
It is. It gives you a sense of, I hate using the word normalcy, but to be able to really achieve a career and to do anything, like even if it's working a reception desk or something that brings money into your life that you have earned, certainly gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of productivity and a sense of just accomplishment.
Absolutely. I remember thinking about what I wanted to be when I grew up, or what I wanted to do after I, gained some skills and confidence. What did I want to do? And my answer to myself is passion. Chase passion.
Well, if you don't have that, don't get into any field that you're in. Just like my daughter, for example, she likes to play basketball, so she plays high school ball. It was a passion for her as far as a communal aspect, but it's not something that she practiced and did every day of her life until midnight every night, sitting there with a basketball in her hand. You know what I mean? You're only going to succeed as far as the effort that you put into something, right? If you don't love something, you're not going to put in the effort that you should put in to master that something. Because to really master something is something you feel called to do, or something that you do whether you get paid for it or not. You do it because you love it. And that kind of intensity only comes from something you love. That's the only way you can get really good at something that you love, or at anything in general. So if you don't really love what you're doing, you shouldn't do it, because you're not going to put in the effort required to master, to be at the top of that game. And the only people that are going to really be successful in that particular field are people who are willing to put in that extra time and that extra effort because they love it.
Passion.
Love it.
Love it. Brian, I really want to thank you very much for taking the time out of your day and coming down to the studios here and recording this for the Blind Abilities listeners. It's been great talking to you. I'm looking forward to your studio in Uptown and going to come down there and check it out. Sounds like a really good time. So thank you very much, Brian.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff, for doing this. And I can't wait to hear it.
When we share
what we see
through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap between
the limited expectations and the realities
of blind abilities.
The realities of blind abilities.
For more podcasts with a blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com, on Twitter at blindabilities. Download our app from the App Store, Blind Abilities, that's 2 words, or send us an email at info@blindabilities.com. Thanks for listening.